Hello friends, this is Growl. In this video, I'm going to talk about gearing up in Shadowlands. Blizzard has reduced the loot from traditional sources like Mythic Plus End of Dungeon and raid bosses in this expansion. A lot of people are struggling gearing up in order to progress their character, so I wanted to share my thoughts and give some tips and advice on what you can be doing right now to gear up. Before I start, I want to give a bit of a disclaimer. Not everything in this video is going to be easy. There's no one secret trick Mythic Raiders don't want you to know about where you just open a secret hidden chest in a wall and get a 250 item level piece. This is going to take some time and effort. It's not happening overnight. I do kind of like it this way anyway. It makes it so it's a bit of a journey for the gear instead of just getting it handed to you. So first off, the absolute most important thing you need to do for gearing is your weekly Great Vault. By now, most of you know what this is, but you get a reward based off of your highest achievement and amount played in a specific game format. Since I know people are going to ask, you can actually open the Great Vault anywhere with a macro to see your progress. I'll pin it in the comments if you want to use this in-game as well. Almost everybody who plays WoW specializes in one format. Maybe you mostly play Mythic Plus, or maybe you're a PvPer, or just someone who logs in to clear the raid with their friends and does dailies. For the Great Vault, you probably need to be either doing a decent amount of Mythic Plus or PvP. If you aren't doing either of those and you're mainly just raiding, this expansion is going to be especially hard for you to gear because of the reduced amount of loot drops from raid. Chances are if you're watching this video, you haven't done 7 Mythic bosses yet. You may only have 1 Mythic raid piece or even 0 if you haven't gotten that far into Mythic. This is why it's really important to advance in Mythic Plus or PvP so that you get this choice of a 226 item every week. Having multiple choices means that you will almost always get something that's worth it for you. It might not seem like a lot, but this stuff will add up over time. Another thing I want to mention about the Great Vault is to always try and aim for best in slot pieces for your character. For example, let's say I have the option to choose between a ring and a belt in my vault. The ring would be a higher item level upgrade for me for now, but if the belt has the best stats I want and the ring doesn't have as good stats, I'll put off that small temporary power gain in order to benefit my character later by choosing the belt. If you're still struggling to get all of your time 14s or reach 2100 in PvP, I have some advice that I think will help you. The best thing I would say for Mythic Plus is to take advantage of good weeks. The Mythic Plus affixes rotate every week, and some weeks are much easier than others to complete keys on time. Putting in a lot of time during the easier weeks allows you to raise your item level, Raider IO score, and meet some better players much easier. There are going to be way more groups forming and being comfortable pushing high keys and pugs during weeks like this. Once you do that, you'll have a much easier time applying to groups and pugging on the harder weeks because you'll have a better looking resume in-game. In Mythic Plus, this is referred to as a push week. Since all timed keys are considered equal regardless of which affixes are active, the easier the week, the better it is to play. The next 2 fortified weeks coming up, I would consider to be very good push weeks to do keys. Fortified Sanguine Quaking, and Fortified Spiteful Volcanic. I know Mythic Plus can be challenging, and it may have turned off a lot of players. The last few weeks have been tough, and not everyone has been gearing up. Give it another chance. Dedicate a few days to working hard, pushing up some keys to try and build some score, and time keys that you haven't before. Message friends or guildies that like to play as well. Chances are, other people with similar goals as you want to try and advance in Mythic Plus as well. If you feel like your class isn't as popular and it's hard to find groups, the key is to be the organizer. Whenever you can actually get into groups, add the people who seem good or are at least nice to play with, or look within your guild or friend network. Message them and try and set up dates ahead of time. Hey, let's play at 7 p.m. tonight. Nearly all of the very high-rated off-meta players that I know happen to be the organizers of their group as well, or at least were at some point. Building up your PvP rating is a bit more complicated, and honestly, I'm not really the best person to give you great advice on that as I'm still learning myself. The one noticeable thing I've seen from PvP though is have a good attitude and try to network. If you're strictly pugging through LFG, it's going to be a nightmare at low level. You're going to spend 20 minutes finding a group, lose one match, and then disband. That's how it usually went for me. Have a good attitude, be willing to accept criticism, but don't give it to others unless you feel that they're comfortable with it or they ask you for it. You aren't going to get to 2100 or 2400 overnight, but it's something you can work towards. If you're in the 16 to 1800 rating range, putting in a lot of effort now to learn how to improve and make that big push to 2100 will pay off huge in the long run. That being said, you can still get decent gear for being 1800 that might not be best in slot, but will help you catch up. Alright, so now you have a decent source of really good gear coming in every week, but that still leaves you with a big problem. You need to be geared to do all of that stuff. It doesn't matter if you have a couple 226 pieces when all of your other items are like 184. Gearing has two parts. You need to find your best in slot gear, but you also need filler gear. Filler gear is good for raising your item level and giving you some extra stats to continue doing harder stuff until you can get your best in slot. There are quite a few sources for filler gear, and the biggest barrier to how fast you can do it is just how much time you can spend. The Great Vault is shared between all formats. You don't get more best in slot gear from doing all three of them. Filler gear, however, is separate from each source, so the more of each of those three things you're doing, the better off you'll be. I understand that not everyone is going to have the time or the resources to do all of this. I just wanted to propose some different options with some advice as to how to get them done. The Heroic Raid is actually a pretty good source for filler gear considering its 213 item level, which is a big step up from most people's lowest pieces. Finding a guild to clear Heroic with every week will help speed up your gearing process a ton. Especially if a lot of these players are doing their weekly Great Vault stuff, they will have some 226 slots that they can trade to you and you can trade yours to them. Personally, I wouldn't have recommended getting into a Heroic only guild in the last expansion. With the difficulty of this raid, combined with how hard it is to get that filler gear, I think it might actually be worth it for a lot of players. Unfortunately, I don't know how many guilds are just only clearing Heroic and then stopping for the week. You may have to sit through a few hours of Mythic progression each week as they try and down some of the harder bosses. If this isn't your thing, it's going to be maybe a little bit of an inconvenience, but you may still have to get it done. It's simply something you'll have to weigh in if it's worth it to you for the extra couple 213 pieces a week. The current best source for filler gear is Mythic Plus. It's a repeatable way to get 2 items per run that can be up to 210 item level if your group is capable of doing plus 15s. This can be a bit slower of a grind than other sources, but it's something you can do over and over and it only gets easier with time. Make a list of the pieces you need to upgrade and look through the dungeon journal to see where you can get those items. You should then have an idea of maybe the 2 or 3 dungeons that are best for you to get upgrades and then mainly look to do those. Don't get discouraged when your one item that you need doesn't drop. Keep in mind that the chance of getting that exact item that you need is not very high. The higher your score and gear, the easier it will be to get these items. That's because you can get into better groups or bring friends that are able to trade them. If I'm really looking for a specific item from a dungeon, I'll usually mention it in party chat early on. That way if it drops for someone and they can trade it, they're going to feel bad if they don't give it to me. The one key ingredient that I think most people are missing to getting geared in Shadowlands is actually PvP. Virtually everyone I know who's PvEing is also PvPing this expansion, and it's looking like if you're serious for early season Mythic Plus or raid progression, PvP is going to be mandatory. This is because of the Conquest and Honor vendor system. Each week you can earn Conquest and Honor from rated PvP. Conquest allows you to buy 200 item level pieces from the vendor in Oribos, and you can upgrade this gear with Honor depending on your rating. This gear is so powerful compared to what you can get from any other source. This is because you can pick exactly what piece you want every time and buy it from the vendor. You can select your lowest item level piece and immediately buy a 200 item level replacement. Then you can upgrade it to even 220 if you're only 1800 rating. Personally, I don't play WoW for PvP, but I've actually spent more time PvPing this week than doing anything else just because of how strong the gear you get from it is. If you're struggling with gearing right now, PvP gear is the last piece of the puzzle that you're missing. Get your best in slot from your Great Vault, and do a heroic clear or some Mythic Plus to get some filler gear. If there are a few stubborn pieces that you can't find upgrades for, hit up the PvP vendor and buy them. What makes PvP loot so crazy is that even though Conquest is weekly capped, you can go back and earn all of the conquests you missed earlier and buy multiple really good pieces in just 1 week. This week I spent some time doing RBGs and 2s with whoever was nice enough to take me. I managed to reach 2100 and already bought 226 pieces with basically best in slot stats for my shaman. I also have enough conquest and honor to buy another one, and next week I'll be able to get a 4th piece. Even if you can't get that high rated, you can still upgrade the same amount of pieces to a reasonable item level depending on what rating you reach. Then with all of these new items, hopefully you can push to a higher rating or at least use them to help get into a guild or a Mythic Plus group to do what you want to do. I know there's going to be a lot of you upset at the idea of doing PvP. I don't play WoW for PvP, and I would prefer to just do Mythic Plus all day if I had the option. It's not mandatory at all if you want to get best in slot for everything, but it will speed up the process by a ton. I'd recommend if you're mainly a PvE focused player right now and you're struggling to get decent loot, to give it a try. Don't set some super high goal like getting 2400 to get a 233 item in your weekly chest. Just aim to slowly work towards 1800, and you can use all the conquest and honor that you make to fill your weakest slots of gear. Who knows, you might actually like it. If I haven't already upset you in this video, I have one more recommendation for gearing up. Bind on equip items, or BOEs from the auction house. These are dropped from trash and raids and can be purchased for gold. Depending on the server, they may be more or less expensive, and if the stats are good for you, it can be a very fast way to gear up. If you have experience making gold in WoW, or maybe you just have a bunch saved up from a previous expansion, this may honestly be one of the most time-efficient ways for you to get good items. If networking isn't your thing, or you just spend most of your WoW time chilling alone doing your own thing, it's still possible to get some really good stuff. Personally, I took enchanting on all of my characters, and I've just been disenchanting all of the end of dungeon loot I didn't need instead of vendoring it. I sold most of the materials I made throughout all of the expansions so far on week 3, I think, and I made like 300,000 or 400,000 gold, which could have easily translated into a pretty good BOE. There are a lot of people who make money from playing the auction house, and lots of add-ons that you can use to help with trading or even gathering professions. Personally, this is something I don't have that much experience with, so I can't give great advice on how to get lots of gold quickly. Just know the options out there, and there are a lot of decent ways to make gold. When I first started WoW, I would actually join these 2x4 farm groups in the custom group section of PvE. It looks like this is still a thing, and it's a really chill way to make gold. It's not very fast, but you can basically just half AFK and put on a podcast or a show or something while you do it. Maybe load up some internet poker or trade some Bitcoin so that you can get rich while you get rich. That wraps up my thoughts on some of the best ways to gear in Shadowlands. I know this has been kind of a tough topic for a lot of people. A lot of even the top players that have connections to do high keys or PvP as well as mythic raiding, and they're even struggling a bit. I can understand why it's tougher for the average player, especially someone who hasn't played the game in a while to gear up. You can't get into groups to get the gear, and if you don't have the gear, it feels like a vicious cycle. I hope this video was helpful to you, and if you have any tips that you want to share to others, leave them down in the comments for them to see as well. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be releasing more beginner and high-level WoW content throughout all of Shadowlands. Happy keying!